comprehensive package of support which business have been asking for us to provide. A package to support businesses, £1 billion worth of tax cuts, £2 billion in loan guarantees, along with £4 billion of European money. That is a £7 billion package of measures, real help, funding we can provide because we've decided to take action to support our economy through this recession. Mr. Speaker, I believe that these steps will help businesses through their current difficulties and enable them to invest so they can make the most of the opportunities that will arise when the global economy recovers. I'm also determined that the present economic uncertainty does not push aside the importance of protecting the environment and our long-term needs for a greener and secure energy future. We're already on track to exceed our emission reduction targets under the Kyoto Protocol and are further ahead than all of the G7 countries. We have now increased our commitment for emission reductions to be at least 80% by 2050, which is by far the most ambitious in the G7. And through the Climate Change Bill and the new 5-year carbon budgets, the UK becomes the only country in the world where legislation sets a binding commitment to cut emissions. And the government will set out detailed proposals for meeting that new carbon budget laid before Parliament in the summer of next year. Our climate change strategy is based on a range of policies, encouraging more fuel-efficient businesses and transport and better energy use at home and targets for renewable energy generation. And central to that is the European Union Emissions Trading Scheme. Last week we conducted the first auction of carbon allowances in Europe, which gives firms the incentive to cut overall emissions. And as the government has demanded, aviation will now be included in the Emissions Trading Scheme from 2012. And that is a major step towards achieving our environmental objective of reducing the impact of aviation on climate change. And it's enabled me to look again at our proposals for reforming air passenger duty. Mr. Speaker, last year there was cross-party support for reform of air passenger duty and converting it to a tax per plane. And much as I'm in favour of a bipartisan approach, it seems in this case not to have reached the right conclusion. I believe that this proposal could harm the aviation industry at a time when it's facing huge problems, so instead I've decided to reform air passenger duty into a 4-band tax system, ensuring that those who travel further and have a larger environmental impact meet the cost, and I believe that this will be a better and effective way of reducing emissions from aviation. Mr. Speaker, improving insulation and energy efficiency will also help us reduce emissions as well as cutting energy bills for families. In September, we announced a £6.8 billion home energy savings programme, and this is expected to lead to a 70% increase in installation rates for cavity wall and loft insulations this winter. The Warm Funds scheme has already used its additional £50 million to help modest income households get free energy efficiency measures. So today, I can announce that I'm providing an additional £100 million in new money and bringing forward another £50 million to help up to 60,000 more households insulate their homes. Mr. Speaker, the most pressing energy problem for many families is paying heating bills. We've already tripled cold weather payments for this year, up to £25 a week for those on modest incomes. But I know there is widespread concern that the fall in the price of wholesale energy has not been reflected quickly enough in reduced household bills. I can tell the House that Ofgem, the regulator, is to monitor price changes and publish quarterly reports detailing the link between wholesale and retail prices. Alongside that, if sufficient progress is not made in the next few months in closing gaps in pricing between payment methods, the government will use statutory powers to end unjustified pricing differentials. Mr. Speaker, oil and gas from the North Sea remains an important part of our energy supply, and I'm consulting closely with industry over how, together, we can put in place the right incentives to increase production from marginal oil fields. Mr. Speaker, the economic recovery must support our environmental objectives and not come at its expense. Government policies will drive more than £50 billion of investment and activity in the low-carbon sector over the next 3 years. And this year, we became the world leader in offshore wind energy capacity. But we must make even more of our transition to a low-carbon world. And as part of our commitment to bring forward capital spending, the government will invest £535 million more quickly on energy efficiency, rail transport and environmental protection. And that will mean more homes benefiting from better heating and insulation, better flood defences, as well as 200 additional trains. One of the many steps we are taking to ensure high-value, green-collar jobs, a potential 1 million jobs in the low-carbon industries in the next 20 years. One further announcement here: renewable energy, along with nuclear power, will play an increasing role in meeting our energy future. I can announce today that the government will extend, therefore, the renewables obligation for an additional 10 years to 2037. And by requiring energy companies to generate a share of energy from renewable sources, that obligation will underpin investor confidence and support the development of renewable energy. We are taking the right long-term decisions to protect the environment, to ensure low-carbon jobs, and to provide energy security. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take steps to improve the supply of mortgages, to avoid repossessions and increase the number of new homes. And today, I can set out proposals to do that. The current problems in the housing market are the result of the credit crisis, which has drastically reduced the opportunities for people to get a mortgage loan. Last month, we took decisive action to recapitalise the banks so they can maintain the availability of lending, including mortgages. And today, I welcome the publication of Sir James Crosby's report on finance in the mortgage markets. And his principal recommendation today is that government support for the mortgage market should be by providing for a temporary period guarantees for securities backed by new mortgages. I share Sir James's concerns about the availability of mortgage finance, and to implement his recommendation, the government would need to obtain state aid approval from the European Commission and resolve some of the technical and practical considerations, but we will work up a detailed scheme based on his recommendations and seek state approval to proceed. And I will also take into consideration the interaction between that proposal and the credit guarantee scheme, and I'll report back by the time of the budget. Mr. Speaker, I'm also setting up a new body, a lending panel, which will monitor lending to both businesses and households. It will bring together the government, lenders, trade bodies, consumer groups, regulators and the Bank of England to monitor lending levels and practices by the banks. And we intend to consider how else we can help ensure that those in work but facing financial difficulties can remain in their homes. It's not just the availability of new mortgages which is the problem in the housing market, it is also fears about meeting the cost of existing loans. Mr. Speaker, it's right in these cases, repossession should be the last resort, and I'm pleased to say that this has been recognised by the lenders. The major lenders have agreed today that where someone is facing repayment difficulties with their home mortgage, they will wait at least 3 months after the borrower falls into arrears before initiating repossession proceedings. And that will give many homeowners time to work with lenders to find a solution. And I also welcome the commitment from lenders to explore all possible options, including accepting a minimum payment or mortgage rescue products before and after homeowners get into difficulty. It's also important, Mr. Speaker, that families worried about their finances and mortgages can get expert and impartial advice. So I'm announcing today £15 million of new funding for free debt advice available to everyone, regardless of their circumstances, and available across the whole country. Mr. Speaker, I intend to take 2 further steps to help homeowners facing financial difficulties. First, in September, we extended the support for mortgage interest scheme, which covers mortgage interest payments for those who've lost their jobs. And today I can announce that we will increase the upper limit of that scheme for mortgages up to £200,000 from the present limit of £100,000.